Hello and welcome to Filled with His Love. I recently listened to an interview with Chloe Valdari on NPR talking about her theory of enchantment. I'd never heard of this theory, and so I dug into it a little bit. I enjoy seeing how those who are not members of the church come up with ideas that mesh so interestingly with gospel truths we've been taught all of our lives. So I'll share a few quotes from the interview without commentary. And then I'll share my own view of how Valdari's views relate to gospel principles. Okay, so here we go. The following are all quotes from Valdari. Valdary is her name. The theory of enchantment says that the world is fundamentally good, and that we as human beings can tap into this truth and become aware of this truth. And ultimately, that means learning to love ourselves, because so much of our conflicts, our bitter conflicts, come when we feel insecure about aspects of ourselves that we don't like or that we haven't taken full responsibility for. And feeling insecure and not knowing how to deal with that insecurity, we often project it onto others in order to cope with the pain of insecurity. As we're trying to combat the fear that pervades our culture, we need to be reminded of how beautiful we are as humans and what we're capable of, how big our love can be for both ourselves and each other. Interesting quote, I thought. Okay, now, in the course of the interview, she also quotes Martin Luther King Jr., and I think that may have been because it was aired on Martin Luther King's birthday when I was listening to it. So I want to quote him as she did. He talks about, at the beginning of this quote, agape, A-G-A-P-E, agape. If you haven't heard of that, that's just the opposite or the other kind of love. There's eros, which is romantic love, and agape, which is the other type of love, non-romantic. So Martin Luther King says, agape is something of the understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is a love that seeks nothing in return. It is an overflowing love. It's what theologians would call the love of God, working in the lives of men. And when you rise to love on this level, you begin to love men, not because they are likable, but because God loves them. Now back to Valdari. The trick, the task, is to learn how to watch as our emotions rise and fall, because emotions are always rising and falling. You'll notice if you start to feel, let's say, sadness or grief, there's a beginning point and an end point. It's like a cycle. Okay, now here are some of my thoughts. I'm going to begin at the end. Let's listen to that last excerpt again. The trick, the task, is to learn how to watch as our emotions rise and fall, because emotions are always rising and falling. You'll notice if you start to feel, let's say, sadness, grief, there's a beginning point and an end point. It's like a cycle. The other day, a missionary told me that recently he began to wonder why he sometimes felt down or discouraged. He was serving with all his heart, bringing people into the church, and yet he still had these moments of sadness or discouragement. I like Valdari's thought, and I told this missionary the fact that he sometimes feels down, sad, or discouraged is normal and natural, even, for me, inevitable. We don't live in mortality, always jumping up and down for joy. President Nelson taught that we can feel joy in spite of our circumstances. That's true, but he did not say that we would feel joy all of the time. He did not feel joy, for example, when his wife Danzel died in his arms. He has described how difficult that was for him, how painful and difficult emotionally it was for him. We mourn with those who mourn and weep with those who weep. Our emotions are in continual flux, and that's okay. It's what it means to be human. Now a word about Martin Luther King's thoughts on agape. I would substitute the word charity, the pure love of Christ, for agape in his excerpt. I think it would flow very well. Let's try it with charity. Here's the quote that he had with charity substituted. Charity is something of the understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is a love that seeks nothing in return. It is an overflowing love. It's what theologians would call the love of God working in the lives of men. And when you rise to love on this level, you begin to love men not because they are likable, but because God loves them. We can accept others who may not be likable. As President Monson taught on more than one occasion, we need to see others as God sees them. Now a few thoughts on the beginning excerpts from Valdari. We need to love ourselves. I've talked before about self-compassion. So much pain and misery comes in relationships because we take out our frustrations with ourselves on others. Think about that for a moment. Someone may ask, for example, why did you do that? And because of an insecurity inside, you interpret the question to mean, that was not a smart thing to do, so why did I do it? So you could get angry and pounce on the person, all because of an insecurity inside you, maybe an insecurity you've never even noticed before. But the person who said that, why did you do that, may not have been asking at all in a way that was putting you down or telling you that it wasn't smart to do that. The person might have just had a genuine interest in knowing why you did what you did. But because of our insecurity inside ourselves, we take offense and pounce on the person or attack back. So enchantment theory, at least in the way Valdari explained it, means that we need to be enchanted with ourselves and others. Sounds a lot like the second commandment, just a little stronger. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. It was not by accident that when Jesus was asked, so who's my neighbor, he told the story of the Good Samaritan. He was speaking to Jews who had long been at odds with the Samaritans. He might have said, everyone is your neighbor, especially those you feel are different from you. It's easy to love those who share lots of similarities with us, but not so easy to love those who are different. That is one of the central points of enchantment theory. If we can learn to love those who disagree with us, maybe we're on two different poles, for example, on political, we're just totally on opposite sides of political thought, or maybe we're members of different religions, or maybe different genders or races. We find all kinds of ways to emphasize differences and conclude that we can't relate to someone else because we're too different from each other. Even within the church, even those who make and keep sacred covenants can differ from each other in so many ways. The idea I gleaned from enchantment theory was that each child of God is infinitely unique, infinitely complex, infinitely remarkable. We hear someone say something and immediately conclude why they said it, or we see someone do something and say to ourselves, how could they have done that? If we see that person as God sees them, we don't jump to conclusions. We don't impute motives to that person. It's a dangerous thing to do. We can't know somebody else's motives. They are, after all, infinitely complex, these people that are surrounding us. If we want to know why they did what they did, we need to find out more about them. We need to sit down, have a chat, talk to them, and find out why they are behaving in a certain way or thinking in a certain way that seems diametrically opposed to our way of thinking or doing. When people act differently than we would act in the same circumstance, we tend to conclude all kinds of things that may or may not be true at all. But Jesus said to love everyone, to see everyone as a child of God, and yes, to be enchanted with others because of their personal qualities, even though those qualities may be different from our own. Hope you'll be able to think about this a little bit like I have, and it'll be helpful for you. And we'll see you next time.